It's a TX Water Polo Pod special, this week featuring Houston Hall, a member of St. Mark's first state championship team back in 1975. He went on to play at Harvard University, after which he returned to Dallas, where he was a founding member of Dallas Water Polo, maybe the state's most successful masters program. And now he sits on USA Water Polo's board of directors, giving Texas a direct presence at the heights of American water polo. Joe had a chance to speak with him last week as we continue to look back on some of the foundational events in Texas water polo. Now, Houston Hall. Here we go.
Houston, how are you doing?
Doing great, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. So today's we are with Houston Hall. So Houston is in a very unique position. He played water polo back in the day, back in the 1970s with St. Mark's, and he also is involved highly with water polo now, kind of currently up in North Texas and nationally with USA Water Polo. So Houston has a long list, so it's going to take me a sec to do all the introductions here. So Houston played at St. Mark's. He graduated in 1978. He won a state championship in 1975, and in 1977 when he was all-state team captain his senior year. And then he went off to go play at Harvard, kind of where he was all New England. He was captain and MVP his senior year, and he graduated in 82. And then he came back and played Masters Water Polo with Dallas Water Polo Club. He helped with the growth of the sport in North Texas, and he is currently on the USA Water Polo Board of Directors, and he helps with local clubs like Pegasus and Thunder and such in North Texas. So, Houston, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for taking the time. How are you doing during the whole COVID-19 stuff going on?
Well, like everybody else, I'm getting kind of antsy, but letting my hair grow out, trying not to get too fat, and keep busy.
Are you being successful on the exercise kind of side of things? I know I'm not.
I've not been very successful yet.
That's okay. Have you picked up a new hobby or doing anything fun during this whole time?
The fun part has been having a bunch of my family living with me. Two of my daughters who are, kind of came home to shelter in place, and one lives in New York and she's home working remotely. One is at University of Virginia, and she came home for the last 2 months to finish up the semester. And so it's been fun seeing family.
Yeah, well, good. So now, hopefully you've been able to catch up a little bit on the best of Texas. The main reason is because the 1975 St. Mark's team was represented there. So they didn't win the first round, but just tell me a little bit about that 1975 team.
That team, I was a sophomore on that team, and I think I probably weighed about 130 pounds right there. But we had some fantastic players. We had a guy named Scott Phillips, who was the only guy I've ever seen who could throw a water polo ball against the wall and pop it.
Oh, geez. Okay,
and
there you go.
Yeah, he later went on to play for Fosdick at A&M.
Nice.
So he was a real water polo player. Then we had some people like Greg Krause, who became a incredibly fast swimmer and would have made the 80 Olympics if we'd gone. And he was just super fast. So we had a combination of, a few people that actually had been coached somewhere. And I think Scott Phillips had gotten coaching from Dennis Fosdick. But the coach of the team at that year was an English teacher named Tim Shutt. And so it was a kind of a combination. And Texas water polo back then was really in its early stages. I mean, we had I don't think there was another team. There might have been one other high school that played water polo in North Texas. So every weekend we'd get in these big, Ford vans, and our coach, John Stutzman, who was also our calculus teacher, and our swim coach, Ken Merton, would drive, a dozen boys down to Austin or San Antonio or Houston, and we'd stay wherever we could stay. I remember one tournament, we stayed at they opened up some gym that was going to be demolished, and we stayed on the floor. We might stay in a hotel room.
Everybody has budgets. So there you go.
Yeah. And I've seen some pictures And we were just, I'm sure it's very similar to what it's like now when you get boys on the road. But, we had a good time. We had a really good time. I remember one time we stayed on Jim Yates' apartment floor.
Jim,
played at A&M.
the man that is still playing. He is going to World Nationals, everything. He's still the most fit player out there in the water. So you guys also won in 1977 when you were like the team captain and got all state. So what was the differences between this, like the 75 team and the 75?
I was not the team captain, but I did get all state. And so I'd say that team was maybe not physically as good, but probably deeper. By then we had John Stutzman was the head coach, and Ken Merton was his assistant. Stutzman actually worked at it and learned a lot about water polo, and was a pretty good coach. But we were in pretty good condition. I'd say we were in very good condition. We had a really talented goalie, Peter Krause, who was my best friend in high school. He was like 6'7", and back then we played in our shallow, deep pool at St. Mark's, and so in the shallow end, he was virtually unstoppable.
So back then, did you have one of those big, huge goals in the shallow end?
Yeah,
like the wall goals. So like
exactly.
Okay, yeah. So I remember playing on those back in the day. So
Peter could fill it up, and the only games we really had up at St. Mark's were we would have we'd play SMU a lot. We played their club team, and we'd play outdoor in their 50-meter pool, which was quite fun because by then Greg Krause was at SMU. And so Greg and Peter could battle it out. But we'd always beat SMU. I remember one time.
That must have felt good.
Yeah, it was fun. We had the Mexican junior national team come up to play us one time. And we were shocked at how dirty they were. We were these, quote unquote badasses from St. Mark's, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a contradiction in terms, but those guys were small but vicious. I remember
they still are. So
yeah, and they still are probably. But we lost to those guys. But we got, the team was good. We had the two captains were Peter Krause and Sandy Watling. Sandy was a really good player. He could, steal the ball, pass the ball, shoot. He was in great shape. He was a natural, and I was kind of the guy that liked to shoot a lot, and someone would go in. And
but did you like to play defense? That's the question.
I like to play defense.
Okay,
I did. Good. Back then, the rules were different. We had the flag, deal where you had to, if you fouled the whole three, if anybody fouled the whole man 3 times in succession, you were ejected.
Yep. And so then you had to switch plays and stuff like that.
You had to switch. Defense. So you could get 2 fouls on the guy, then you had to switch out.
Oh, yeah.
And, there was a lot of driving. It just seemed like there was more driving back then than there is now. I think the players are – and the big difference now is that the coaching is so much better and the players are so much better. I mean – it's amazing that the St. Mark's 75 team made the Sweet 16 in your tournament, because I don't think any of the teams that I played on could have competed with the St. Mark's teams of the last 10 years, for instance.
I think you're selling yourself short a little bit, Houston, and your team short. And plus, the 75 team was kind of like that kind of represented the 75 and the 77 team kind of combined a little bit.
Yeah, that team was good. That team was really good. That 75 team. But you have to remember the competition where we thought it was really stout back then. And Alamo Heights and the Clear Creek, Clear Lake. Were really Lamarck, Humble. Those were the teams that we would always end up playing at state.
So, that was a fall season back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a fall season starting for UIL in fall 2021. But so every weekend, so you drove down to San Antonio or you drove down to Houston. Is that how it pretty much works?
Almost every weekend. And it wasn't a really long season, maybe a couple months. And but yeah, we would make road trips literally every weekend. And nobody ever came up to Dallas.
Come on, you never had a home game? Because Because I know Mihai doesn't like to have home games now either, but
I don't recall ever having those teams up to Dallas.
okay.
They're,
I do remember this is a long time ago. I was what, a sixth or seventh grader, and I came up and played at a state championship for eighth grade and under at the St. Mark's Pool from San Antonio. This was a little bit later. This was like in the early 80s, but yeah, so that was a long time ago.
well, that's interesting. I didn't know there was middle school water polo in the 80s.
Apparently, yeah. I
We didn't
remember
have
taking
it
a trip.
Yeah, because I remember I was introduced to water polo at Camp Longhorn.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah, and so the guy that started Tags Water Polo, Tex Robertson, and coached the UT team, started this Camp Camp Longhorn on Inks Lake, and it was very aquatics focused. And one of the things we did was play water polo, in these pools that were, set out into the lake. And that was a lot of fun. And we also played a version of water polo called watermelon water polo, where
Really?
they grease the watermelon. And they paint it like white, and you would just basically try to take it underwater, hold on to that greased water polo ball. Watermelon, and make it down to the other end without getting drowned.
That sounds like
that was quite fun.
That sounds like a game for swimmers that don't have any ball handling skills. So there you go.
Yeah, it was great. And anyway, so I started playing water polo my freshman year at St. Mark's, largely because I had been injured. I was a competitive tennis player, when I was 12, 13, 14. And but I played football in the fall. So I was the quarterback on the middle school team. And but I had to have knee surgery. My knees got messed up from tennis and football. And so I had also learned water polo, at camp, and I was a swimmer in middle school during the winter. So I was a pretty good swimmer. So I just dropped football and took up water polo my freshman year. That's how I got into it.
There's been plenty of people that have kind of dropped football or dropped basketball and come over to the pool. So it's been great.
Yeah.
And nowadays, water polo is one of the biggest sports at St. Mark's.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the aquatics program at St. Mark's, water polo and swimming. I mean, it's definitely the biggest sport at St. Mark's in terms of people. They started in middle school, and I think there's 30 kids on the water polo team, and probably more than that on the swim team.
Yeah, I mean, it's just grown by leaps and bounds. Even since I've been up here for the last 10 years, it's grown like the sheer numbers. And now, I mean, so water polo back in the day, we already talked about a couple rules and such that were different. You have watched water polo now and kind of grown over the past couple decades. What's the primary differences? Just besides the coaching and such like that, from the water polo back in the 70s and the water polo nowadays.
Well, I mean, one big difference is there's so many more teams that play, and there's women, and there's girls that play. So it's just a much bigger sport now than it was back then in terms of participation. I'd also say that the overall level of play is far greater. I mean, the kids are putting a lot of effort into it, and we have club water polo now, so kids are able to play year round. So kids are getting better coaching, and they're working harder at it for longer, and so they're a lot better.
So were you able to play?
Skills are a lot better.
So we back in the day, were you able to play outside your high school season, kind of at all?
No. There was no club water polo in North Texas until 10 years ago?
Yeah. But I mean, I just didn't know if there was masters or not back in the day. But no, I mean, it's just that's amazing that you guys were so successful and only played for about 2 to 3 months a year. So yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. But I think that was the way that everybody did it throughout the state too, because everybody then would go into swim season, and then they'd have baseball or something in the spring, and then everybody would go do something during the summer. Well, I don't think there was a whole lot of people playing a lot. Yeah, I mean, the level of all sports has been elevated a lot in the last 40, 50 years. I mean, so back in the day, it was like, I could play water polo in the fall. I'd swim in the
spring, and then in the winter, and then in the spring. You know, one year I played baseball, one year I played golf, one year tennis. I finished up strong as a senior with ping pong.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. That's a little different, but that's okay. A little bit less
Basically,
injuries
it was the way
happening.
for me to get off campus very quickly.
Oh, I understand. You got to find the loopholes. You got to find the loopholes. So now, like, how many teams were at the state championship back in just back in the 70s?
You know, I think we had probably about it was 16 or 8. I can't remember how many exactly made it. I think my senior year, I remember we played a round robin on Saturday and Sunday, and my guess is that 8 teams qualified for the state championship. And I remember we ended up we lost to Clear Creek by 1, and then Alamo Heights beat Clear Creek by 1. And then the final game was we played Alamo Heights, and we literally scored a goal with like 1 second left to win by 1. And so all 3 teams ended up with the same record and the exact same goal differential. So all of us shared the state title that year.
Yeah, I definitely see that on. That is that everybody has to take a little bit of a double take whenever they're going up the list of the former state champions.
And there was not enough time to keep playing, so we had to go home.
Oh, hey, you know what? I have been kicked out of pools before, kind of during tournaments. So, but that must have been very nice to end the tournament like that, but a little bittersweet that you have to share it too. So.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I remember that game against Alamo Heights. I actually wrote my college essay on that game.
Really?
Yeah.
What specifically on the
game? It was just so dramatic. Just the back and forth and the physical effort that it took, and the twists and turns, and how it related to. I think water polo is a great sport for a lot of reasons, and one is that it's so difficult, and you have to work so hard, and you've got to fight through stuff during a game, and if you get bad calls, you got to roll with it, so that's I don't remember the exact details of my essay, but I remember it must have been a pretty good essay because it got me into where I wanted to go.
So. Yeah, and you went to Harvard, and you graduated in '82, and you actually started as a freshman in the club team, and you guys transitioned to a varsity team for your junior year. How was that overall experience at Harvard?
Well, it was really interesting. We played at a really good pool that was pretty new when I got there, called Blodgett. It had an indoor 50-meter pool with a separate kind of major league kind of diving well, and the water polo team was club, but we had a lot of people that were really into it. I mean, and the current chairman of USA Water Polo, Mike Graff, was actually one of our refs. So he had played when he was in graduate school there, several years older, but he'd come back and referee. And but our coach was a guy who was a swim coach for a local club, Belmont Swim Club. And but we had, it was great. I mean, we had a really fun group of guys. It became very much of a social thing as well.
Of course,
we all got along.
It always does in college athletics. So
yeah, and but it was freewheeling. I mean, I won't get into too much of what we do, but we didn't have any supervision.
We can stick to the pool. We can stick to the pool if you like. We can stick to the
pool. But it was quite fun, and we'd travel around and we'd played all the other Ivy League teams, and we'd beat them all except for Brown.
Okay.
Brown had a really good coach, and they recruited from California. All of my teammates were, I think when I started as a freshman, I had almost all of them from California, but we had a goalie from Miami, and we had another guy who was also a senior when I got there, who was from St. Louis, who was a really good player. And I was the only Texan. But it was great fun. We played, Iona, Fordham, Bucknell, Navy. all the other, like Duke, teams like that. And then
So for your
occasionally
first,
we'd have UCLA or Stanford would make a trip through
like
the
New
East,
England, nice.
and we'd play them.
And that was always a humbling experience, I'm sure, even back in the day, right?
It was a humbling experience, but we when we played UCLA, we played at Blodgett, and it was on local TV. So I actually scored a goal on local TV.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
so
and we lost 15-3.
That's okay. That's okay. You did like you didn't let him score 20. That's the main thing. So, but now how did you get it going from club to varsity? What was that process? Obviously, you were probably part of that process in the day.
Yeah, I was. I was my sophomore year. Some of the guys a year older than me, and as well as some as me and some of my classmates decided that, hey, we're taking this pretty seriously, and we're not bad, for the East. So why don't we? And we're playing teams like Yale was varsity at the time, and Brown was varsity, and we wanted to beat Brown badly. And so we figured maybe we need to be varsity. And so we petitioned the athletic department, and lo and behold, they said yes. And we actually did have one woman on the team.
That's okay.
And so she played on the men's team, varsity.
Was she a good, productive player on the men's team?
Yeah, she was. Yeah. I mean, she wasn't very, very large or anything, but
but short, quick, and aggressive can make up for that. So
yeah. So, but it changed quite a bit as once we became varsity. But the other thing that we did was we had 2 seasons up there. So we'd play in the NCAAs in the fall, and then we'd take the winter off, and then the spring we could play club. So, and we continued that even after we were varsity. So we'd play varsity in the fall, and then we'd have our club team, kind of start up in the spring. So it was, a lot of water polo up there.
It was the best of both worlds. It was the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it was.
So you were supervised in the fall with a coach and practices, and then in the spring, maybe not as supervised. So
yeah, exactly.
Did you ever get Rowdy Gaines to come out and play?
No, Rowdy Gaines was not there, but Bobby Hackett was at Harvard.
Oh, I thought Rowdy Gaines was at Harvard because I know that his name's on the record board up there. So,
well, that's because I'm sure he came. I think he swam for Georgia or Tennessee or something like that, Florida. But Bobby Hackett was at Harvard, but he was not a water player. He was the best arm wrestler I ever saw.
Okay, that's a little cross training. That would actually you would think that would transition kind of to the pool. Did he at least try it? Did he at least try water polo?
Never came out. I don't think his coach, who was also his local swim coach, Joe Bernal, was also the head swim coach at Harvard, and he had Bernal's Gators, and Bobby was a product of that program, and that's why he was at Harvard. So I don't think Joe Bernal would have ever let Bobby try water polo.
Did you let any of the swimmers ever come over?
Yes.
Okay.
We had lots of swimmers.
Good.
Lots of guys that did both.
And Blodgett Pool is still a very nice pool, and they have kept it up very well up there. My one funny story from Harvard was my first year coaching of varsity water polo on the East Coast. This is before I had even coached a game. There was a tournament at Harvard the first weekend of the season. We weren't playing, so I thought I'm going to go up to Harvard and scout my competition. So I had never been to Harvard. I had never been to Boston, so I drove up there. And this is back in the day whenever I had to get out the MapQuest stuff, and their stuff wasn't on their phone. And I'm driving around the Harvard campus, and I'm looking for any sign of a pool type thing, and I have to stop. And I asked, finally, this on a Saturday morning, the 7th person I asked finally knew, kind of where the pool was. The 7th person, no one else knew where the pool was at the time. And I'm like, really? Come on! And then it was across the river, so that's why it wasn't actually on campus. I mean, it was on campus, but it was. It was more adjacent to campus. But I was like, okay, they have their priority straight up here. Like the athletics wasn't like the biggest thing for a lot of those students there. So, but
Well, you know, Harvard is one of the few places where you have to learn how to swim to grade.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Then I'm shocked that there weren't more people that had the ability to know where the pool was. But that's okay.
We've reached the halfway point of today's podcast, and we'll return after this.
In many podcasts, this time would be filled with ads for electric toothbrushes or recruiting services. Not here. Instead, we're asking you to show your support for TXWaterpolo by donating to it. Go to TXWaterpolo.com/donate and help us continue covering the sport we love in the Lone Star State.
Hi, I'm U.S. Olympian Janai Kerr, and when I need to stay up to date with my water polo news in Texas, I listen to the TX Water Polo podcast.
Now, part 2 of today's show.
But now after Harvard, you went and worked and became very successful in the business world and kind of made your way back to North Texas and eventually started playing again for Dallas Water Polo. So how'd that happen?
Yeah, it's funny. I spent about 4 years in New York after graduating from college, and then came back down to Dallas in '86, and worked in the investment business, which I still do. And but I stopped playing water polo when I was 22, and then I started again 22 years later, when I was 44. And the reason is my kids, one of my daughters was getting tutored by a math teacher at St. Mark's for math.
Okay.
And she was married to Mihai Oprea.
Really? I didn't know. That is
I didn't know. And so, but I knew he was a swimming and water polo coach, and I think I'd met him once. So I knew he was from Romania. And, but I didn't really know him. And we started talking about water polo. I said, oh boy, I wish I could play now because, when I was 26, I started wearing glasses, and now I wear contacts, and, there's no way I'm going to get in the pool with with glasses on. Yeah. And my contacts are going to wash out. And that was my perception.
Yeah. Okay.
And she said, no, what are you talking about? Lots of people play water polo with contacts on. I said, really? And she said, yeah, you should come out, call Mihai. So I did. And he told me about Dallas Water Polo Club, so I came out. So it's just a serendipitous meeting with Janice Oprea, who basically got me back into water polo.
And you don't say no to Janice. So
no.
Yeah, like if she wants you to go play, you're going to go play for sure. So I didn't know that story actually. So, and then how was it getting back into the pool? There's no flags on the pool deck. There's no switching in center defense. It's a whole different game.
Well, it's in one way it was like riding a bike again, but unfortunately it was like riding a bike like a 3-year-old. And because I remembered how to do things, how to do the egg beater and how to swim and how to shoot and so forth and so on. But I had never really been trained by a real water polo coach.
Yeah.
So I was more like I just figured it out kind of. And but it was really fun because there were people like Mihai. I can't say enough about what people like Mihai Oprea have done for water polo in the state, and Frank Connor and Andres Rodriguez and George Fenton and all the people who had been, with Dallas Water Polo from the time that Mihai kind of came to the United States. I don't remember if he started it, but he got involved, and they had some really, really good teams before I was even involved.
And they still have some good teams still. So
yeah. And so, but it was great because there were people on those teams that when I started, I had the first 6 months I'd have to ice my shoulders after almost every time getting in the water because I just was not used to swimming.
It was 22 years. It was 22 years. So there you go.
Yeah. And but it was great. Within a reasonably short period of time, I kind of got into the flow pretty well, and got to play a lot of water polo against most of the teams in Texas. But we've taken a lot of trips to other places as well, Chicago and California and so forth and so on. So it's been fun.
I actually played at that tournament in Chicago. That was a long time ago. Jeez.
I remember that.
So now, I mean, also kind of you came back and played Master Water Polo, and you mentioned George Fenton, who kind of led the way as far as the starting and getting a lot more youth water polo going back in 2009. How did you what part did you play, and how did you get involved, or kind of how did George get you involved then?
So I guess you're going to have to remind me exactly what year it was. So I think I started playing Dallas Masters in 2004, and I'm guessing it was maybe 2009 or so.
Yep. That is when we started youth water polo.
And at that time, it was still only us up. It was Dallas Water Polo Club Masters. It was St. Mark's, and maybe one or two other high schools in North Texas.
Correct.
That was the only water polo we had.
Yeah, there was South Lake Carroll played boys and girls, and then Denton kind of played a combined boys and girls.
Right. So there was very little water polo. I mean, SMU wasn't playing anymore, and George came to me and he said, I want to start a junior program within Dallas Water Polo Club, and I think we should hire Joe Linehan from Houston and bring him up here to do it. And I don't know if you had already talked to George about this idea at that point. I think you had. I think you and George had already worked this stuff out. And George wanted me to help pay for it. And I said, absolutely, I'd love to do that. Even though the only thing I know about Joe was what I saw on the pool deck from the other side.
That was a little, I can be loud.
A lot of very assertive coaching going on there.
But our teams were competitive and well coached and stuff like that.
Yeah, they were, and very, very well coached and very competitive. And I also knew that you had been, you were basically one of these water polo animals that eat, sleep, and drink water polo, and you'd done a great job of growing the sport in Houston. So it made a lot of sense. And so we brought you, George and I partnered on this endeavor from a financial standpoint. And we brought you up here, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And I appreciate you stepping up, and it was a challenge coming up here. Yeah, for sure. But I also kind of see it as a blank canvas, and without the support of you and George and the community, it would not have happened. And this was a huge kind of a team effort. Yeah, by far. And you were a big part of that. So I thank you. So any of those athletes that played back in the day or are playing now, it is because of the decisions of George and Houston and some others that were involved to actually kind of make a concerted effort. We are going to build our junior water polo program here. So,
yeah, I mean, guys like I mentioned, Mihai and Andres Rodriguez and Frank Connor was huge, and all the people that have refereed and helped coach, that really started, that were part of the Dallas Water Polo Club. So I think the Masters community up here has deserves a lot of credit.
And now the wonderful part is that a lot of those players that played back in 2009 or after are now coming back and playing now for Dallas Water Polo Club.
Exactly. So all these kids that I got to know when they were 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade at St. Mark's went on to win state championships and go play at Brown or Cal or Navy or wherever they went, are now coming back.
So as a Masters player back in those days, like especially the early days, whenever we were kind of ramping up all the events around the state and such, how was it going and playing as Dallas to go play like a Viper Pigeon team or a Thunder team or a St. Mark's team and going, I have to play these guys again?
It was really fun actually, because the high school kids did not like to lose to us.
Oh no.
and I remember hearing you and other coaches saying, those guys are old enough to be your parents. And
swim them.
And so our whole strategy was to hold on.
Yeah, exactly. We also tell them they're just going to hold you. Just keep moving. Yeah. They will let go.
And, and mostly we beat teams, but we not always. And it was really challenging and to play people that were in shape, because we never were in very good shape and still aren't in great shape. But
that's Masters Water Polo, though. So
yeah, Masters Water Polo. We try, but I mean, it's hard when you practice them for an hour or two a week. But yeah, it's great to see the kids, get better, and they get. It's just unbelievable how much better they get if they play water polo for 4 years, or much less 8 years.
And year round at that too. So
yeah, and at year round. So it's been really gratifying to see a bunch of kids really get into water polo and grow, individually, and have their teams get better and have them kind of catch the water polo bug and go on to play either in their colleges or with masters teams, come back, get involved in coaching, get involved in reffing, play with us, play against us. So it's fun. It's been very fun.
No, yeah. And again, I appreciate all the effort and time back in the early days of the North Texas Water Polo. And then after getting involved a little bit at the local level, somehow you got talked into, or somebody said, hey, Houston, come on over here. What about the USA Water Polo Board of Directors? How did that happen?
Well, I think what happened was because I'd been playing Masters for a while. Of course, I was a USA Water Polo member. And back in around 2009, back when we started the youth program at Dallas Water Polo, a couple of years after that, there was kind of a changing of the guard at USA Water Polo around the same time that you came up to Dallas.
Yeah.
And Mike Graff and a few others, Bill Smith, joined the board. And of course, Mike is an old Harvard guy. I remember him from then. And Chris Ramsey became the CEO. And then I remember, I think I started paying attention to USA Water Polo, and I saw what they were doing, and they were making, really turning it around fundamentally. And I got to know the guys a little bit, and and then after a while, it occurred to me that, and to them, that I think you'd been at Dallas and then you'd started Thunder, at this time. So Dallas Water Polo Club junior program kind of became Thunder, and various other clubs. I can't remember the exact iterations that we had. And the sport was really growing in North Texas, and we wanted to continue to grow that. So I talked to USA Water Polo about potentially bringing you on to USA Water Polo, actually. Yeah. And this is something that you and I talked about as well. And so I joined the board and, made some financial commitments to USA Water Polo to fund the development of the sport, in Texas, beyond just what we were doing with Thunder and so forth. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. Does that ring a bell to you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you were on the board, and then it came up. So where can we kind of put some effort into growing the sport outside of California? And then Texas came up, and
so it turns out that our USA Water Polo had, the financial situation at USA Water Polo had improved dramatically. The sport had been growing. I mean, their mission was to win medals in international competition and to grow the sport. And it dovetailed very, very closely with what we wanted to do in Texas, starting in North Texas. And so the idea was to have a Texas Development Fund, which we started at USA Water Polo, that would essentially fund all your activities and bringing in new events, seeding clubs, trying to get UIL sanctioning.
Of course, that was a huge
all the things you've been working on the last many, many years. USA Water Polo had I think a role in that. I mean,
of course,
your hand, mostly. And but yeah, it's been great. I've been on the USA Water Polo board for almost 5 years now, and I can't say enough about the staff there, the leadership, the board. I mean, it's a very, very well run organization with very good governance, very strong financial footings. I think it has done a great job of growing the sport the last 10 years. And, I think there's a lot. I mean, they see Texas as probably the top market for growth. And now that we've, your efforts and the efforts of people like Chris Cullen and others and Scott Slay and just all the people that have been working on this in Texas for years, we got the UIL sanctioning. And, COVID notwithstanding, which is, I think, is a road bump, only a road bump. We're going to be starting, high school varsity water polo in the fall of 21.
Yeah, it is exciting. I am still continuing to talk to athletic directors and coaches. Obviously, the COVID thing is kind of put kind of tempered a little bit of the momentum, but I think people are still excited. I still think the UIL is excited, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, I am really excited. We're probably going to have about 200 teams that are playing high school water polo. Then that's just going to make the need for clubs more and more and more. And we talk about, this is what I talk about. I go, I don't want to just be compared to California. I want us to be as big as California someday. Now, that's not going to happen in a year or 2 years, or maybe not even 10 years, but we are now moving in that direction, and there's a lot of momentum going there. And I don't think this COVID thing's going to be any more than a speed bump, kind of like you said. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you and I have always been right on the same page.
Yeah.
And that's why it's been such a pleasure working with you.
And I do appreciate all the effort and time that you volunteer with the USA Water Polo Board of Directors, with the Dallas back in the day. And also, aren't you locally on the board with Trident and Pegasus as well?
Yeah. So, again, I'm involved with Pegasus. And so Nicola came to me, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yep.
An old water polo guy from Montenegro in Germany, and a doctor, and
via Pittsburgh,
and had started water polo clubs and wanted his kids to play, and wanted to start a water polo academy modeled along a European kind of model with real emphasis on fantastic coaching. And I said, that sounds great, I'm in. And so helped him get that going. I brought in Tom Dalton, another Masters player, who had played in New Mexico growing up and wanted to get back to the sport. And he became the CFO. I'm the vice president. We're both on the board. Nicola is the president. We brought in Spencer Dornan.
Great coach.
Fantastic coach. Who
a fantastic person too.
Pardon me?
An even better person. So
great person, and he became the coach. And now, Pegasus has grown to be. I think we actually rolled Dallas Water Polo into Pegasus, so now we're kind of a group within Pegasus.
That is some symmetry there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And so George Fenton no longer has to worry about the administrative duties at Dallas Water Polo.
He can travel the world. He can travel the world now.
And so it's been great. I mean, we've got 15 coaches. We're at three or four pools. We're over 80 kids now. Like almost all of those are under 16. We're going to be feeding local high school teams with our players, like Highland Park and Jesuit, and hopefully other teams like Highlands and so
the Dallas ISD teams and such. Yeah,
the ISD teams. So we have our mission at Pegasus is to provide great coaching, and teach as many kids possible the game of water polo, and all the great things that come with that. And so we're definitely in a growth mode. I mean, I think one of the things I've been noodling about with Pegasus and USA Water Polo is how do we tap into some of the other high schools that have traditionally not played water polo, some of the maybe less socioeconomically advantaged areas of the state, with scholarship programs and so forth and so on. So that's kind of my next mission. Once we get really going here again, and UIL is upcoming, I think there's ways that we can leverage what we have right now, which is a great platform, at Pegasus and other clubs around the state, and in USA Water Polo's resources as well, to try to bring the sport to a more diverse group of kids.
Yeah, I mean, kind of people always go, Joe, y'all have done such a good job down in Texas. I go, yes, we have, but there's just so much more work to do, and the socioeconomic and the disadvantage, that's just one aspect. There's just so many places still to grow in Texas.
Yeah.
And we as coaches and the athletes, we couldn't have kind of done it without people like you involved kind of behind the scenes and now up front with the USA Water Polo Board of Directors. Houston, thank you so much for doing the interview today. I do appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Joe, and keep up the great work.
I do appreciate it. Yeah, take care, and I hope we all get back and I get to see you on the pool deck soon.
And that's it for today. Our thanks to Houston Hall for his time speaking with Joe last week, and thank you for listening and for your continued support of TX Water Polo. Until next time, so long from Austin.
Spend it on myself and you, trying to turn the world into a playground with all my might. Tables are turned and the ride is on the way round. Hold on tight, waiting in line, running my mind. I can't wait to get out again. Counting the time, thinking of mine, anything to get out again.
This has been a production of TWP Sports LLC.
My dog is scratching at the door.
I can hear him.